There are 5 reasons why Americans are so broke, and in today's video, we're gonna talk about what those specifically are and what you can do to avoid them. As a former financial advisor who's helped many people through their different personal financial situations, here are the most common problems I'm seeing, and no, these are not just anecdotal. Because according to Lending Club, over 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and more shockingly, 50% of those that earn over $100,000 per year are still living paycheck to paycheck as well. So one of the first reasons why Americans are broke is that they don't really think about the future and they don't see the value of compound interest. In other words, they think compound interest is boring. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from, because when you start investing for the future, oftentimes in the first year or maybe first 5 years, it doesn't really look like anything is happening. And this is one of the most misunderstood concepts that we talk about here on the channel, and it's a huge reason why Americans pull out their investments way too early and never see the benefits of compound interest. So when you start investing and contributing to your retirement accounts, what you'll notice is that maybe for the first 5 or even 10 years, nothing really grows or doesn't grow as fast as you might have anticipated. But the thing is, with compound interest, all of the gains are actually exponential, and they're actually all towards the end of the compound interest cycle. Now, telling an American that they're gonna be rich in year 29 or 30 or even year 40 of investing is kind of like telling my former self, hey, you can play video games after you've done your homework. Nobody actually wants to do that. They just want instant gratification. But let me show you the math, because if you want a guaranteed way of being rich, this is frankly it. Pretend you're able to invest $500 a month into a retirement account, earning you around 8% per year as a rate of return. An 8% rate of return, by the way, is pretty modest, because the S&P 500, since the inception of it, has been returning 9.81%. So I'm just gonna use 8% here to account for any taxes or fees. Here's what that table looks like in terms of contributions versus total returns. At the end of year 1, you had an 8% return on your $6,000 total invested, so that's $480 in gains. Now, $480 is nothing to write home about. It's not gonna change your life in any material way. However, you're getting the snowball started, and the snowball of compound interest will start rolling down the hill, accumulating more and more snow as it gets bigger and bigger. As every year passes, you're responsible for contributing another $6,000 per year, while the money that you have already is invested and growing for you at 8% per year. That means your base balance will start to get bigger and bigger as you continue to do this, and by year 10, your total gains are now $33,872. So at the end of year 10, your future value is now $93,872, and that's the combined value of both of your contributions and your gains. By year 20, 30, and 40, you can see now that the gains are actually starting to outweigh your contributions by quite a bit, with the gains making up 147% of your total contributions in year 20, 307% in year 30, and 599% in year 40. So hopefully you see how this is exponential. You now have $1.43 million in gains when you put in a total of $240,000 over this period. That brings your total future balance to $1.678 million, and when you actually visualize this compound interest on a graph, it actually looks a lot crazier. You can see here that all the gains are towards the end of the cycle. You can see that this line at the very bottom here, that's your contributions. It's growing very steadily and linearly, while the future value of your balance is growing exponentially. So it really comes down to trusting the process, trusting the math, and knowing that you're gonna get those returns in the market and not pulling out your investments too early. According to the Wall Street Journal, more Americans are treating their 401ks like cash machines, with 3.6% of plan participants actually withdrawing early, up from 2.8% the year before. And while many of these retirement plans like your 401k or your IRA will let you withdraw early for certain life situations, my recommendation is to try to leave it in there as long as you can, because you really want to take advantage of those gains later on. The second reason Americans are more broke than ever before is due to the cost of services and goods going up across the board due to inflation. As of the most recent inflation report, we can actually see the cost of goods per month is rising month over month every month since basically January 2021. That's a mouthful. There was one month in which it was flat, July 2022, but a lot of this is a result of the pandemic fiscal and monetary policy that we had to employ to kickstart the economy again when everything was shut down. As a result, we're still paying the price for that monetary policy that was implemented back in 2020. As of the most recent inflation report, the stuff that has gotten way more expensive in the last year or so has been motor vehicle insurance, caretaker labor, juices and drinks, baby food, as well as other produce and meat items. Surprisingly, gas is only up 1.3% this year, but the big ticket items like homes and cars are up considerably. Since 2019, the median home price has gone from $309,000 $413,000 in America all the way up to $420,800, and that's an increase of around 25%. Used cars are up 24% in the same period, according to CarGurus' index, and meanwhile, the wage growth in the United States has not really been keeping up at that same level. In fact, wages haven't been up more than 20% in that same period, so you can see that they're lagging the other big ticket items. That, plus the overall cost of living increases due to all of the inflation that we've been experiencing, means that there's just less money to go around for these big ticket items. So while inflation isn't something that's directly in our control, what is in our control is maintaining our affordability rules when it comes to buying certain things. By making sure that we're sticking to our affordability rules and spending within reason when it comes to, let's say, a car, then we're gonna be a lot better off in terms of our budget. I made 2 videos on this channel about affordability, but the short of it is that for housing expenses, you wanna keep your housing expenses less than 30% of your gross income per month. And for cars, you wanna follow the 24/10 rule, and that's where you spend no more than 10% of your gross income on transportation costs per month. I'm gonna leave links to both of those videos down below so you can check out whichever one interests you the most. The third reason why Americans are so broke in 2024 is that they have poor financial habits and they fail to correct them. For example, a lot of Americans neglect to invest for the future, and with any excess disposable income, they might actually just impulse spend it. A common scenario is you get your paycheck, you pay for all of your necessities, then you have that money left over in your checking account, and because it's there and available, you actually go and spend it. In my opinion, this can be fixed with just a small and simple decision that you make, which is to automate your savings so that every time you get paid, a portion of your paycheck gets taken out automatically. Maybe it's 5% or even 10% of your paycheck, but the idea here is that it's a very simple thing. Because your money is not hitting your checking account, you won't be tempted to spend it. That's also a reason why I think the 401k is such a popular investment vehicle in the United States. It's because it acts like a forced savings account, because every time you get paid, that money gets automatically put into your 401k, so you can't touch it. I like to relate this money concept to the psychological effect of Parkinson's law, which is the idea that work expands to fill the time available. Whenever I give myself 1 week to write a paper, for example, I will take the full week to write it, but what's really interesting is that if my deadline was just 1 day or perhaps the next day, I'm able to write it a lot faster. The same thing kind of happens with money. If you have $500 sitting in your checking account just waiting to be spent, it's kind of like sometimes you just make up different ideas or different excuses to go spend that money. There's no formal name for this psychological effect, but I feel like it happens a lot. That's why sometimes when you get a tax refund of, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000, you are way more tempted to spend it because all of a sudden you have this money available and it's there for the taking. So you're just like, oh, I guess I might as well go buy some video games and some popcorn. When it comes to making good financial habits, it's really the small decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis that will compound and give yourself a better financial situation for the future. So in this case, if you automate your savings, it's such a simple little thing to do, but will make a big difference later on. It's kind of like the same thing when you're trying to lose weight. The simple decisions are not super hard in a silo or a vacuum. You might swap out soda for water one day. But if you're able to consistently make that decision every time you're presented with a soda option and you opt for water instead, by doing that every single day or every single month, now you're gonna start losing weight naturally. All right, another bad financial habit that I see a lot of Americans partaking in, and is probably a reason why they are so broke in 2024, is lifestyle inflation and living beyond one's means. There's so many people out there that wanna look rich but don't have the money to actually back it up. So instead what they do is they finance a lot of their big purchases, like their cars, their watches, or their homes. And then what they do is on social media is they flex those things online. And what the really interesting thing is that you never see how much money is in their bank account. In fact, one of the lessons of the book, The Millionaire Next Door, is that many of the great accumulators of wealth actually keep their lifestyle cheap and modest while their income increases. The author found that by studying many millionaires back in the 1990s, that's probably the equivalent of $3 to $5 million in net worth today, is that many of them kept their lifestyles the same even as their income skyrocketed. And you know what these people aren't usually buying? They're not buying purses with big designer logos. They're not buying shirts super branded in Gucci. They're not buying the Gucci flip-flops, the Prada sunglasses, etc. Whenever you get paid more through a raise or a promotion, you might be tempted to fall into this trap of trying to upgrade your lifestyle so that you can show off to your friends. But trust me guys, do not fall for this trap. So here are a few signs of lifestyle inflation, and if these apply to you, you might want to check yourself. Number one, you're spending a lot of money eating out a few times or even more per week. You're buying new clothes, you're living lavishly, yet you still have credit card debt. If that is you, you might be succumbing to lifestyle inflation. Number two, you're spending money on status symbols and objects that you do not need. So for example, you might be buying a luxury car that you don't absolutely need. You might join a social club or a country club just to show that that you have that money or you're buying designer clothes. If that is you, you might be succumbing to lifestyle inflation. If you're buying this stuff, you wanna make sure it's well within reason, because if it's causing you any financial stress at all, that might be a sign of lifestyle inflation as well. Number 3, you're often paying for convenience. So things like DoorDash, Uber Eats, or perhaps services that you would never have paid for before. If this is you, that might be a sign of lifestyle inflation. Again, always try to ask yourself, do I really need this purchase? And if the answer is, no, I don't really need it, but I want it, then you might wanna think twice about what that expense is. Number 5 reason why Americans are so broke in 2024 is that we live for the present and we don't save any money. I alluded to the fact that Americans don't really think about their future really early in this video, but you can really see how much we don't think about our future as evidenced by our savings rates. According to the Federal Reserve, the personal savings rate of an American is 3.2% as of March 2024. That's absolutely abysmal. Consumption is a heavy focus here in the United States. In fact, you might even call it America's pastime, because we're always being hit by sales, discounts, and financing options. And a lot of this originates in the post-World War II era, where the country was still trying to recover from the Great Depression, and it was deemed patriotic if you supported the economy and spent money. According to Elizabeth Cohen, an American history professor at Harvard, quote, "Consuming has been a way of demonstrating that the economy and society are continuing to be vital and viable." This is a real dilemma, I would say, today, where 70% of GDP is dependent on consumption. And yes, the GDP of the United States was $27.36 trillion at the end of 2023. The fact that we are one of the most wealthiest nations in the world, but have one of the worst savings rates in the world, is a glaring problem. In general, people who live in Europe tend to save more money, with many European countries ranked for the top countries by savings rates. China and Japan are also countries with excellent savings rates as well. My personal theory here is that it's definitely cultural. Many of these other countries might view money differently. Money might mean something different to them than it means to us, as well as the fact that they don't really finance a lot of things when it comes to buying. That means a lot of people will only buy something if they have the cash for it, so therefore their savings rate has to be naturally higher in order to save up to buy those big ticket items. Another reason why I think Americans tend to spend more than save is that they often don't see the point of saving because of everything being so expensive, and this is known as doom spending. This article from Fortune says that Gen Z is so annoyed that they can't get in on the housing market that they're doom spending on nice things that make them feel like grown-ups, which is another symptom of the living in the present mentality. The reality is, though, is that in order to not be broke in the future, we actually need to take those steps today to start saving and investing for the now, because the now will eventually become the future, and if you don't start now, when are you gonna start ever? Living within our means and affordability are some of the other things that we talked about in this video, and I will link those resources down below for you guys. Let me know if any of this resonated with you in the comment section, and make sure to subscribe to this channel. And also, if you're interested in the top 5 wealth killers that you need to avoid at all costs, I will leave that video right here. So I will see you guys either in that video or a future video on the channel. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one. All right, peace.